What's in there?
Believe it or not, we've actually been in situations like this before.
Where people come up to us, invade our personal space, then go on to ask the most ridiculous questions.
We even ask questions like, are you hot in that? And are you bald?
Or, do you even have hair? What's it like being oppressed?
But seriously, what goes through people's heads when they ask this? Do they feel pity, or do they think that by asking this an AC is gonna spawn in our hijabs?
I wish.
Unfortunately, sympathetic questions won't make an AC spawn in our hijabs, but the questions we receive are certainly understandable.
According to the Pew Research Center, only 9% of Americans are properly educated about Islam, and little more than a third know some about the religion. These numbers have little changed since 2007 and have not moved much at all since Pew Research began asking the question in 2001. So what does this say?
Well, it would explain all the silly questions.
Now, we don't mean to make fun of you particularly.
But it is a bit baffling to see how little people know about hijab and still how quick they are to judge.
And you may not realize that at the other end of the rope, but these assumptions have extreme effects. So today, we're here to address that.
The hijab can be put into one saying. The hijab is like an oyster shell. It's a protective covering made to shield something valuable. Yet, just as some might misunderstand the oyster's purpose, many people fail to grasp the meaning behind the hijab. They make assumptions about the person wearing it without ever pausing to consider the complexity and richness of the pearl that lies within.
Being here gives us the opportunity to let you all know a little more about the hijab as a whole. We'll start off by answering some commonly asked questions, as well as addressing the lack of basic familiarity with it.
Then we'll go on to talk about the real-life consequences of these false beliefs.
Finally, we'll wrap it up by encouraging everyone here to challenge misconceptions, seek knowledge, and to really understand the pearl and the oyster with a fresh set of eyes.
Due to human nature, people are curious, so they ask questions.
And yeah, these questions can be pretty funny to hear about sometimes, but it shows just how little people know about things that they should already be educated about.
But just in case you may be the type of people we're talking about, let's go through some assumptions or questions that might be running through your head right now.
Like, what's the purpose behind it?
Are we forced to wear it?
And lastly, is it a religious obligation or simply just a cultural tradition?
So let's start from the beginning. Hijab is wear the hijab for the sole purpose of respecting religious principles.
The hijab serves as a symbol of modesty, faith, and a protection in Islam. We allow our hijabs to represent our religion and the values that are associated with it.
The hijab was also used as a form of empowerment for Muslim women. Instead of society only seeing women for their beauty, the hijab allows people to see that they are so much more than that. This lets them be appreciated for their character, intellect, actions, and more.
The hijab allows us Muslim women to define our worth on our own terms. And modesty doesn't only apply to women. Men in Islam are required to cover up as well.
The term in Arabic used to describe the parts of a body that must be covered around certain people is called an awra. The awra for men is considered to be the area between their navel and their knees, but the awra for women is their whole body, except for their hands, face, and feet.
And Muslims aren't forced by anybody to cover themselves. However, they are expected to.
If you're confused as to what that means, according to the Islamic regulations, Muslims are expected to cover certain areas of their body, but at the end of the day, it is their choice of whether or not they want to. Nobody but ourselves can make that decision for us.
Now, the hijab can be both a religious obligation and a cultural tradition. Throughout history, the covering of the head and veiling oneself has always been a form of modesty, regardless of religion.
So, what if I didn't already know the answer to some of these questions?
Well, let me tell you something. You're not alone. According to The Guardian, in March of 2004, the French Parliament voted through a ban on headscarves in schools and universities, outlawing symbols that conspicuously demonstrate a pupil's religious affiliation.
And the French government did this as an anti-terrorism measure.
So you're saying that they made this law banning hijab because they believe Muslims are a threat?
Yeah, which is interesting because stripping someone of their hijab doesn't make them any less Muslim. It's such a big overgeneralization of who and what hijabis are, and it honestly just shows how little people genuinely know about the hijab.
The hijab isn't something to be feared, and it shouldn't be misunderstood. It is simply just a piece of cloth that represents way more than people realize.
And if you haven't fallen asleep yet, congratulations. Believe it or not, now you guys are more educated on hijab than a lot of people out there.
Go ahead and give yourselves a pat on the back. Yeah. And as for the rest of the world who seem to be too ignorant to educate themselves, it unfortunately does cause real-life consequences.
According to NBC News, a Seattle woman was robbed of her hijab at knife point near the University of Washington campus in February of last year.
To state this differently, the attacker threatened this woman with her life, only to end up ripping her hijab off of her head.
Now, if this was just some psycho murderer whose only intent was to make a buck or two, then maybe we can say that this wasn't rooted from racism.
But this man didn't even try to kidnap her. He didn't even steal some money. All he wanted to do was to strip her of something that she chose to identify herself with.
And this woman didn't even slightly instigate this attack. She was simply just trying to get to class like everybody else on that campus.
Now this is just one documented example of the atrocities that occur daily around the world.
And unless something changes, this isn't going to get any better. If anything, it'll probably get worse. Worldwide, there are so many more instances in which Muslims are being oppressed, killed, abused, and dehumanized as a result people not making a proper effort to be informed.
And Muslim women are a common target for this oppression due to the fact that they wear the hijab.
To provide another very recent example, the Human Rights Watch list emphasizes that millions of Uyghur Muslims are being detained in re-education camps in China.
Among several other countries, the United States has accused China of genocide in the Xinjiang region. But all China had to say in response to this was that they meant to keep peace and prosperity through anti-terrorism measures.
This so-called peace and prosperity leads to millions of Uyghur Muslims every single day being forced to drink alcohol and eat pork against their will and religious belief systems.
Not only that, but once you're detained in these camps, you're at high risk of being photographed without your hijab. They do this in order to humiliate women who would have worn the hijab for most, if not all, their adult lives had it not been for these monstrous camps.
As well as being photographed without their hijab, they're also stripped naked to be left alone with older men in order to be sexually abused, regardless of their age. Do they deserve this?
Do they deserve to be taken out the comfort of their lives only to be told that their whole belief system is a lie?
Do they deserve to be brutally assaulted day and night simply because of their religious identity?
And do you think they deserve to be treated like animals simply because they practice a belief that threatens no one but the oppressive powers who fear it?
Islamophobia is the last form of acceptable hate, and this is clear when it comes to world conflicts. Genocides against Muslims are able to be justified because governments can say that they are simply just taking anti-terrorism measures, and for some reason, everyone just accepts that as the truth.
It is saddening to see how easily Muslims can be diminished for who they are, and a change in mindset worldwide is necessary.
Thankfully, we live in a country where we can express our religion freely. This opportunity isn't given to many people worldwide.
The First Amendment allows us to freely talk about topics such as these. It is the reason why we are up here on the stage today.
Now let's take advantage of that freedom.
Let's take apart two different perspectives of wearing the hijab in America, mine and hers. My journey with hijab began in 6th grade in a majority white private school.
And my journey with hijab began in 4th grade in an all-Muslim private school.
I was desperate to change something about myself, so I started wearing the hijab. However, I got a lot of unwanted attention and ended up taking it off, and finally made some friends. But that feeling of wanting to put it back on always lingered, so I set a goal for myself, that I'd start wearing it after spring break of my 9th grade year. Instead of dwelling over the fact that I was different, I instead made myself more approachable to people and questions that they may have.
I started to wear hijab because I thought it would make my parents and God proud. I know it sounds really simple, but that's really it. Although not much really changed for me in my everyday life because of the fact that everyone around me was Muslim, I did also start to get looked at negatively in public. But thankfully, I learned to take pride in my differences, seeing my hijab as a security blanket rather than something that would make people hate me. The moral of the story is that this alienization really does affect people. Although it's nice to be different, it's not always easy.
Although some journeys are easier than others, the struggles are still very real.
Because for some reason, when society sees a woman wanting to cover her hair, regardless of the reasons why, human decency is suddenly out the door.
We Muslim women are just as capable as anyone else.
The University of Qarawiyyin in Fez, Morocco, the first university ever, was founded by Muslim women named Fatima al-Fahri, and it's still operating today.
While the country with the largest Muslim population, Indonesia, was one of the first Asian countries to have a female president.
Take a look at Jihad Muhammad, a 5-time senior gold medalist and world champion who has made her own hijab by Nike, or Halima Aden, a hijabi Vogue model who won Miss Minnesota.
How can we look at such influential figures and still believe that Muslim women are incapable or being quote-unquote held back by the restrictive religion of Islam?
It's evident that there is a double standard whenever it comes to the word modest.
And here's an example of that. Mary herself wore the veil for the purpose of modesty. It's hard to find a single photo of her without her veil. As many of you may know, she's a very revered figure for many different religions.
When we wear hijab, it's always used in the same context as the words oppressed, terrorist, and the list goes on.
But when Mary and her veil are mentioned, words like humble and purity are constantly used.
Modesty has long been the norm in many cultures. For centuries, women have dressed modestly as a reflection of their dignity, values, and respect for themselves and their communities. It is only in more recent times in which exposing the body has become the dominant cultural standard.
Muslim women shouldn't be seen as different or old-fashioned simply because they choose to uphold traditions that have been respected for thousands of years.
Now the roles are reversed, and we must be aware of the situation of our society and what that implicates.
If we can appreciate the beauty behind Mary's veil, then we should definitely be able to get rid of these double standards and focus on our similarities rather than our differences. We can build a world where not only hijabis, but everyone can represent themselves and be seen.
A world where we're looked at as humans instead of assumptions that diminish who we are.
A world where hijabis aren't looked at as just an ugly oyster shell, but instead a pearl waiting to be recognized for its true and unseen beauty.
It's necessary to correct the false narratives in order to understand the depth of what we're really saying.
And you've heard us talk a lot about challenging misconceptions, but realistically, how can we do that?
Well, to challenge misconceptions, you have to start by relearning what you think you already know.
So far, the two of us have, hopefully, addressed the inadequate awareness of Islamophobia and the harmful effects that come with it.
But now the important part is to understand what we can do in order to minimize, if not totally avoid, conflicts that will result from our false representation.
Our solution is simple,
yet effective.
The easiest and most correct way to begin solving this issue is by talking to real people. Ask these people questions, seek answers, and just overall don't be nervous to approach them.
Now, we don't want you to go up to someone and poke their hijab. Just ask them whatever questions you have whenever you think it's appropriate.
And don't be afraid to sound disrespectful.
Just don't be disrespectful.
We've been hijabis for quite some time.
So you can trust that we know the difference between innocent curiosity and then just blatant racism.
If you genuinely just have a question that you think would be disrespectful to ask, then get a feel for the person and your surroundings and make it evident that you don't mean to be offensive.
Because the worst thing that could happen is if you let something get lost in translation that really isn't as oppressive or controlling as you may think it is. Unless you lack social awareness, that should be easy enough.
What people need to realize is that what you say and consume every day does make a difference.
Everyone that you know is a blueprint of everyone that they have ever known, so don't be misinformed.
Don't be the person who gives dirty looks to an innocent 9-year-old.
Open your eyes.
Be a part in making a difference.
And discover the unseen pearl.
We can start at Jenks High School,
but we want to reach the
world.
Thank you.
Thank you.